just for a second here to also talk about another event that's happening in the 1950s that helps to shape our mindset, shapes American culture for the next several decades, even into to 2020. And it doesn't seem like this should have anything to do with culture, but it has a tremendous impact on culture. And what you see is the development of the interstate system. And what happened was it was Eisenhower. Who becomes the five-star general that's leading the war against the Nazis in Europe. But what happens is way back in 1919, he was tasked from going to New York to California, and it took him 62 days to get from here to here with his group of troops that he did. And several of the times they got stuck in the mud, and they had to require oxen to get them out through the mud on their journey. But as Eisenhower then, as he leads the United States and the West, the Allies, to victory, he then comes back home, is extremely popular, elected president twice, and as he becomes president, and he's thinking about, this Cold War. We've talked about Truman and how he says that every day kind of he's overshadowed by the Cold War. Once he leaves office, Eisenhower gets elected, and now, this former five-star general is thinking about the Cold War and national defense. And his mindset is that if Soviet Union attacks us on the West, right, and all of our troops are mobilized on the East, 62 days is a long time to get there. And so what he says is, militarily, strategically, we need to develop a system, an interstate system, that can get us from one place to another in a matter of a few days rather than a matter of 2 months. And so, and also as he was in, fighting the Nazis in Germany, he was also, had access to the German highway system, the Autobahn, and he was just impressed by how easy it was to get anywhere. And so he says, I need to do something like that in the United States. And so he develops an interstate system in order to in his mind, for national security, for national defense. And so he spends $128 billion in the 1950s developing the interstates that we have, which is 42,000 miles of road. And so here we see that the massive development of the interstate all over the country. And you can, as you kind of take a look at the interstate map, you can tell that the East Coast definitely has a lot more interstates than the West Coast. I mean, poor Utah and Idaho kind of get the shaft here. They only have Utah only has 80 and 15. I think 70 does kind of go through here a little bit further south. It's not shown on this map. But anyway, it's definitely the West gets kind of the shaft than the East. But the idea again is for self-defense. And in fact, if you notice, right, the overpasses on the interstate. Next time you drive on the interstate, I want you to notice the overpasses. He actually wrote into the part of the strategy that the overpasses need to be a certain miles, certain distance away from one another. And the idea for that was if the Soviet Union ever did attack, one of the first places that they're going to attack are our airports. What that will do is they'll make sure that we can't take off or land, our planes can't take off or land, and that makes us a lot more vulnerable, and it makes it easier for us to be invaded. And so what his argument is if they ever do bomb us and bomb our airports, we can turn the interstates into these kind of quasi runways. And so that is, again, another means of national defense. And so the overpasses is one way, right? So planes can take off and land within a certain amount of distance. And generally, most interstates have a certain amount of distance between going, one direction or the other direction. So that median is also part of it to help out with the national defense. I want to talk about the cultural impact of this just for a moment. The towns and how this shapes towns. So what you see And this one is by Bruegel in the 17th century, and what he's representing is kind of the common everyday town where you have people that are down here. This one, the reason why I chose this one is it reminds me of Rexburg in the winter. You just have a lot of people out kind of in the freezing cold. But here you have people kind of out enjoying, the pond that's frozen over on the ice, and you have hunters here that are going out and to hunt, and there's people over here, this blacksmith who's kind of working in the day. And what we see is generally the old version of the town is that everything is kind of centered within a close proximity. You have a church, you have schools, you have housing, all centered around the same kind of small walking distance. What happens in the 1950s is this all changes. You have, rather than the downtown areas becoming vibrant, you have the downtown areas starting to die off. And so all of the shops that used to be downtown within walking distance now all go, and you can notice this in your own town, out to the exits of the interstates because that's where traffic is, that's where business is. And so you have people that are kind of leaving the downtown area, and so the downtown areas mainly have become kind of they've become kind of deserts in some ways of life. There's not a lot of shops down there. Most of the time they're occupied by sometimes dental office, but a lot of times lawyer offices or accounting firms. Some towns are trying to bring back that life after decades of not having anything. Some towns might have a bit of a renaissance and they're trying to make a better effort. But most towns are going to focus on these big box stores like Best Buy or Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever the case may be, Walmart. That are coming to the downtown areas, or sorry, coming to the exits instead. And Rexburg is, kind of, it has that function of a smaller town area where you can walk to the university or walk to the downtown area. But even Rexburg has this to effect. When they built the new Walmart, they built it right next to the interstate. When they built the new high school, they built it on right on the other exit, right? And so most of the schools, most of the shopping are going to be away from the central core of the downtown area, and we have more of a car culture that's starting to develop. And another effect in the 1950s, as all part of this, are the suburbs, the rise of suburb culture. And Levittown was kind of the pinnacle of this. Levittown was Levitt was a builder. He was in the war as the part of the war effort as kind of a builder in the war, and then he takes his kind of construction mindset after the war, and he takes a look at what people are looking for when they come home from World War II. And the number one thing that people want is a house, because before they left, they were in the Great Depression. They didn't have cash. Most of the young couples were living with their parents and couldn't afford their own place, and so now they have excess cash. The wife has been working in the factories while the man has been gone, and the man has been being a soldier. Both of them have excess cash, and the number one thing that they want to buy is a house. But everyone kind of gets back to this idea of the American dream. Everyone wants that house with a white picket fence, and so Levitt is the builder, kind of a genius builder. He says, "Hey, I'm going to give people what they want," and so he built 5 million new homes, and it was an average of 36 houses per day. And he did an assembly line. I wanted to show you a clip of this assembly line and some of the kind of the cool elements of it and some of the darker sides as well. We got to take a look at both sides, and if we want to kind of understand the complexity. And then he sold them for about under $7,000, which, if you factor in inflation, that would be about $73,000 in 2018. So thinking about that today, if you can buy a brand new home for $73,000, jump on it, because that is unheard of. And so it gives people this sense of the American dream, right? It fits into this idea of consumerism. We all want to be consumers because that's what makes a good American. We all want to have that white picket fence. We want that American dream, and it all kind of fits into this. And this is going to start to shape culture and society. I'm going to talk about that. But I want to show you the clip that shows the Levitt towns.
In the first year of peace, more than 2 million couples were married. By 1950, 21 million babies had been born in a seemingly endless baby boom.
I came out of service out of the Navy in 46, and I wanted to go and marry a girl that was writing the 3 letters a week to me for 4 years. And she lived in Floral Park. I had a cabin there. And I moved in with the family. There was a mother and father, her sister and brother, and myself, and a baby coming on after a year.
Despite weeks and months of house hunting, some 3 million married couples throughout the country today are still unable to establish homes of their own.
When you look at the books that you read in school, you read of people in a house. You never read of people living in an apartment, which we did, in trees. It's something that's all new. You know, it was really something that you would like to have.
Guess I don't have to tell you, Mrs. Blandings, what a woman's touch could do to a place like this. Yes, sir. A couple coats of paint, little pointing up here and there.
Of course, we wanted our own house, and after 2 years, 2 years in furnished rooms, and you could see some of the dumps we lived in. It was really, remember that attic room in Jamaica? Yeah.
I gotta have a home.
No one is to blame. Everyone is to blame. There's been a lag in home construction for more than 15 years.
In 1945, Americans needed 5 million new low-cost homes, and they needed them right away.
Now there are buildings
Of home ownership would soon be realized by a man about to fulfill a dream of his own and invent a new phenomenon, suburbia.
Bill Levitt, as a young man working with the Seabees in World War II, has this brilliant idea, taking some of the techniques he's seeing right then and there in World War II, building airstrips, putting up housing for GIs, and bringing them back to America for ordinary people. He's sitting there at night with his pals in the Pacific in World War II, saying, what do you want when you get home? Well, I want a house and a car.
Bill Levitt's special genius was figuring out how to mass produce the American dream.
We first came to see that property where they were going to build. It was potato farms, and it stretched like from here to eternity. You would see concrete foundations, nothing but concrete with the heat in. And then down the road there, where in the midst of all the dust, was a frame job going on. And then down on the dust was where he completed, was the sheathing going. And then down the road a bit, and it was like putting your clothes on, from your socks on first, and then putting your underwear on and the shirt, and finally way down on the other end
Was a finished
was a
product.
finished house. And yet, you could see how it grew.
Before the war, the average contractor built 5 houses a year. In Levittown, Long Island, they built 36 houses a day, a grand total of 17,450. Designed for a family of 4, Levitt's basic Cape Cod sold for a minimum down payment at a price most people could afford.
I think there's a great ad in there. Mr. Veteran, you're a lucky guy. You can buy this house with $100 down. The first day that they were going to sell them, the lines were, people started lining up 72 hours before the houses went on sale. Even Levitt was stunned.
A second Levittown in Pennsylvania was every bit as successful as the Long Island Levittown. Everyone, it seemed, wanted a Bill Levitt home.
I beg your pardon, sir. Would you mind telling me who you are and where you're from?
I'm Dick Full from Atlantic City, New Jersey.
And would you tell me why you're moving here to Levittown?
Well, I'm working in this area now, and I've looked the houses over, and I think it's a fine place to raise a family, so I've decided to buy one.
Very good, sir.
My house was a little Cape Cod cottage with a trellis over the door and one window on either side. And it was 4 rooms, nice kitchen, eat-in kitchen, decent-sized living room, 2 small bedrooms, and a bathroom, and it had doors that I could close and open, which we had always lived in furnished rooms. We had no privacy whatsoever, nothing. It was perfect for a young couple.
And we had appendix in the kitchen.
That's right, the mixed washing machine in the kitchen. First time I ever saw a washing machine, I think.
And we fell in love because that washing machine was underneath the stairs, And before that, when we had the baby, it was like 16, 17 diapers a day to wash, boil them on the stove. And needless to say, the family wanted to get rid of us too. They didn't need a baby that was crying in tight quarters. And to have a house of your own, man, that was the way we felt.
After the Depression, all this come on, so it was kind of a gift from heaven, you found these wonderful houses to move in.
And the best thing about it, I guess, was our independence. It was the first time we were away from our parents, completely independent. We did what we wanted when we wanted. Like any kids, they wanted to be on their own, and we were.
Start our family.
That's right. And the rapport between neighbors at first was very good. Excellent, in fact.
Because they were all in the same boat as us. They were all first starting out, mostly young like us, and just starting with their family and their first house, too.
The new middle-class families of Levittown had one other thing in common. They were all white.
I walked up to the salesperson and I said to him, "We're very interested in your house and we'd like an application." And I remember what he said to me. He looked at me, he said, "It's not me, but the management has not as yet decided whether he's going to sell these houses to Negroes or not." And,
I can't believe it. You really thought you had it right. Everything's falling into place.
well, I'd like you to conceive that somebody telling you that there's no recourse, telling you that openly and outright like that.
Bill Levitt saw himself as a home builder, not as a social engineer, and he refused to sell the box. There were court cases against him, and the fact is he was all too typical of what existed in real estate in America in those days, and so in believing that you did not have to and should not have to sell to people who were not white.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is William Levitt, who heads the largest home building firm in the world.
Bill Levitt would become one of the richest men in America by providing architectural, not racial, equality.
Unlike anything we ever encountered before.
This is one of 4 models which are now being built throughout Levittown. The 4 models vary slightly in overall design, but each has the same number of rooms. 2 bedrooms.
I think it was that sense that Americans really did like the comfort of having what the other guy had, but yet they could put a little fence around it and say, "This is mine." And that's really a particular American genius, is to say, "This is yours, this is mine, but we're still all the same."
Did you get all your dreams yet? Is this the first one?
An army of Levitt imitators carried the housing revolution across the country.
Thank goodness that's
By 1955, 3 out of every 4 houses built were built in Levitt-style subdivisions.
I think Levittown represented to a lot of city dwellers a dream that had eluded them all through the Depression and the War, which was to have a place somewhere with a patch of green in the back where their kids were going to be able to live better than they did. And to that extent, it fulfilled that particular vision. To another whole group of us growing up in cities, Levittown was a surrender. You know, that was exactly what we didn't want to be. To us, going to Levittown would be like going to Attica.
Its critics said that Levittown was little more than a voluntary prison, a multitude of uniform houses lined up at uniform distances on uniform roads in a treeless waste. What the critics said did not matter to the homeowners of Levittown. They had built sturdy new lives in sturdy new houses and wrapped their newborn into the nest. What worried many Americans was not the conformity of their own lives, but communist Russia.
So a couple of ideas to just kind of bring these ideas together and to a close is first the idea of the suburbs was mainly brought upon by the idea that people wanted to live close enough to the city to have all of the benefits of going to the movies, going to the theater, going to the art shows, have all the cultural elements of the city, but none of the negative consequences of the city, like some of the crime and the violence that happens often within cities. And so the suburbs was a nice way for them to be close enough, but yet not quite close. And that's where the interstate system helps as being able to make the commutes to where they work in the cities easy, and so then they can go home away from the cities. Another element is that we see within this particular clip is the idea of the American dream. And so we see that all these people that lived through the Great Depression, lived through the hardships, and not knowing if they were ever going to have a place of their own or have all of the latest gadgets like a washing machine. That was a big deal to a lot of them. Now being able to, for the first time after the war, being able to feel as though they've made it, feel as though they have a patch of grass for themselves, and be able to make the lives of their children better than their own. But what we also see, some of the negative aspects of it, is this sense of homogeny, this idea that everyone's kind of feels the same, therefore they have to look the same and have to be the same. And so we're going to see, in the next lecture, we're going to take a look at counterculture and the reaction to this. And another element that's kind of prevents the darker side of Levittown and the suburbs is the racial discrimination that became inherent with everyone feeling as though they have to be the same and look the same, this idea of sameness. Anyone who's different is not accepted, and we certainly see that within the particular clip with the African Americans couple that were going to try to buy a home, and they weren't able to. The rampant discrimination, and it just shows, some of the continuing elements, the systemic elements of racism that the United States continues to struggle with. And this idea of having to be the same or look a certain way is part of that imagery.